everyone, and welcome to Handmade Hero Show, where we code a complete game live on stream. We got a little off topic during the pre-stream and ended up looking at some weird meow hash stuff. That's just how it goes sometimes. Today we are going to try to improve our art pipeline situation a little bit. We kind of decided that mostly the way we had architected our matching is probably good enough for what we want. But there's still some subtlety there, and so what we want to do is we want to go through and decorate our rooms with imported art textures, and the goal here is to figure out how we're going to import those textures in such a way that they correctly get the tags and asset types associated with them that we want. And in theory, that's not going to be too hard, but in practice, there may be just some subtleties. Mainly, all of this stuff stems from the fact that files on a hard drive, the concept was made a long time ago. It hasn't really been improved much. It's still kind of crappy. And so really basic stuff that you would want to do as a developer, such as associate a few enums with a file that merge when you build, is totally unsupported. Like it's completely not anywhere. You have to build all that kind of stuff yourself, right? All you get when you open a file is just some contents, right? And if it's a PNG, then you just get the PNG. And there's no way to say, like, I want to have a little thing where, you know, if I right-click on that PNG, I can put in some information. So typically what ends up happening, right, is people have all these text files. They end up associating with the PNG, and that specifies the extra information that it actually needs to bind to the game. Or in our case, what I'm hoping we can do more so is actually just use a series of sort of template, not C++ template, but the literal meaning of template, meaning a prefab sort of thing. Templates that you can basically put in the file name is what I'm sort of thinking. That'll sort of say, here's the way this PNG should be interpreted, and then it will be interpreted that way. So if I go ahead and get started here, I could show you what I'm talking about. We did the work yesterday to make sure that this stuff works the way we want it to, but we don't actually have the import story straightened out yet. So here is our orphanage, and the walls currently are red, the floor is green, and the passageways in between rooms, those are blue. You can see that right now, right? And so we just want to do a very simple task. We want to make it so that those walls actually use a texture from our art set here, right? Which is one of these like block orphanage, right? And we would like the floor to use this, and we would like maybe other parts of the floor, as we deem it necessary, to use this. So like stone and wood, we will ourselves specify, you know, maybe which ones we want, and then that will be the that will be respected by the game engine, and we'll put them on there. And we pretty much have how we want to do that, but we don't know how to associate the file with how we wanted to do that. So where's that going to happen? Well, if you look at what happens inside the asset system, you can see that we've got this notion of an import path here, where we can call check for our changes, and it actually will look through this directory, and it will look for any changes. Now, none of these things are actually things that our game has imported yet. So all of them will come up as not found, right? But we've never figured out how we're actually going to import those now in some sort of way that makes sense. We did a little test where we could do the hand here, and we did import that. And the way that was working was when you set what was I gonna say? Oh, actually no, I take that back. We didn't set it in the properties anymore. It's just automatic. If you create inside the data directory when you start up the game, what you can see here is there's a local HHA file. If the game sees a local HHA file that you have started, it will pack new art assets into it. So all you really have to do is create one of those, and if you do create one of those, it will start importing. And then if you ever want to stop it importing, you can just rename that file to like finished.hha or whatever, and now that's a finished art file you can distribute. And you could create another local HHA file to then pack more assets into on the fly if you wanted to, but you know, that's the choice is yours, right? So what happens here is it's pretty convenient because I can delete that file, right? It's gone. And then if I run the game, there won't be a hand anymore, right? You can see it's not there anymore because that was an imported little, it's not really a hand. It was a little, I don't know, it was a little flaming thing we imported. It doesn't matter. Anyway, so that being in there, because we haven't created a local HHA, it won't run the import. We have our HHA edit utility, right? And so we can always, that we wrote, we can always create a new local.hha, and now we've got one. If we now run, it will run the import. So right now it's importing. It's done importing, so now I've got that little weird thing back, right? So we did all the work to make all of that stuff happen, and the only thing that we haven't done now is figured out some way to actually associate the things that get imported with the tags and types and all that stuff that we actually want. We even put in ways to do that, we just haven't defined any, right? I don't remember what that was called, but it had a name in here somewhere. It was like tag array or something, tag set. You know, I'm just gonna look because I don't remember. Import grid tags. So we define this thing called import grid tags, and what import grid tags does is it tells you how the image is going to be broken up, if the image is going to be broken up, which, you know, maybe it will, maybe it won't be. So we had a way of doing that, and we, at the moment, don't have anything for just single big images, right? So if we look at what happens, say, with this, this is just one 4096 by 4096 bitmap. And when we import one of these, we don't really need it to be imported as separate bitmaps, I don't think. Now, we could, right? I mean, we could do that. We could break it up into separate bitmaps. I just don't know if we want to. The top pieces and the bottom pieces, I mean, it just doesn't seem like it makes much sense. And part of the reason is because this is like longer, you know what I mean? And so it just doesn't seem like, yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, on the one hand, there are some additional things you might want to do. Like, for example, you might want to expand or contract. Like, if you were trying to make this be a sort of repeating texture somehow. I don't really know that we want to do that. I think if you just stretch it a little bit, or it's probably fine. So, you know, I would say if we just leave it at that, we can just treat that whole thing as one bitmap, right? And we already use it that way, so it's easy enough to do. So really, there's an import grid tags thing, right? But there's also another kind of thing where we just pass a single import grid tag, and that's all it actually needs. And I think that's the path we need to implement today. I didn't load our project file. That's the path we need to modify today, because that's the one that we would use for walls and stuff like that. So process tiled export is the thing that uses the grid tags and is fairly complicated here, right? You can sort of see if that makes sense. We would want another path here that's like process single image import or something like this, that wouldn't go through that path, right? That doesn't actually need to do that. And looking at the way this one goes, it's a little bit more complicated probably than it would need to be. And you can see here we've even got sort of a stub out for that. So we want to have some notion of which of those we're doing, and fortunately we know that by what's here. Block would always come in as one big thing, right? Whereas character or item or obstacles would come in as multiple, right? So I think that it won't be too hard for us to differentiate between them. So let's suppose we have one here, which is just a process, let's say single tile import. And I want to distinguish this between, so there's two types of images we might want to load in. One type of an image is one that we're going to mush down to a single 512 by 512 texture. And another is like a flat image we might use for a cutscene, right? So we've got two kinds of flat imports we might do. And that's fairly important, right? Okay. So what I would like to do here is I would like to sort of grab this part out probably and see if I can just reuse it, because all of this stuff is the same. And I don't really want to be doing too much of that, right? So what I'd rather do here is something like this, let's say. I don't know what just happened there. Did I actually cut that properly? Yeah. Can I just pull this out into a shared piece of code that actually extracts one of these things from an image that's already done? You know what I mean? And then have both of these call it. So, right here where it would have done it, it does the do the rest of the stuff. And right here where we would call it, same thing, right? And similarly, we've got this downsample where we're doing sort of this downsample in place. You can see that this downsample just writes directly to the pixel buffer in both cases. You know what I'm saying? So the source and the destination are actually the same, pixel buffer and pixel buffer. So what that means is, because we're going to want to use this for both routines, this is also something that we would like to have. And so if I kind of go like this and make our downsample by 2 also something that can be called on the pixel buffer, then that gives us this. And so I think that's mostly what we want. And what we could do too is say, well, we just want to downsample it until it fits, probably. I'm not sure what our approach would be there. I'm not sure what our approach would be there, so I'm going to say we'll downsample it till it fits. That may be dumb. In fact, that is probably dumb. But I'm just going to claim that I can do it anyway. Yeah, so this might be more like downsample until fits. And we'll, just, you know what I'm saying to you? So you can basically give it an image and say, I want this thing to fit in here. So just keep, reducing the size till it does. And we could make that more, we could do that in a more a better filter. Downsampling by 2 each time is not the best way to do it, right? Finding the exact downsample that would do it and then downsampling would be better. You know what I mean? So we could improve that someday if we really felt like it as well. So we want to do downsample until it fits, and then we want to do the rest of the stuff. And same thing here, we want to do downsample until it fits, and then do the rest of the stuff, right? And so this is going to be a while loop here. That kind of tries to get this thing small enough, like so. And so instead of this being a for I equals downsample 2 or whatever, actually, I can just get rid of this. Instead, it's just going to loop until the size exceeds the size that we are going to pack, right? And as it goes down, the dims divide. And we probably want to make this handle rectangles because there's no reason not to do that. So we probably want to make this a little bit saucier in that sense, right? So let's go ahead and say that downsample till it fits. Probably take some kind of an image or something, right? We've got this like image.pixels thing. So let me take a look at where that's defined here, right here. So we've got this image32 with height pixels, right? So in theory, inside here, what we could do is say that the downsample to fit bit just takes an image32 and says, here's the thing to downsample. Maybe we'll say that we'll write back, or well, what we could do is say source image and then have the dest image come back, and then we could say the maximum width and the maximum height. And so this while loop here could be like while the width of the dest image, right, which we'll set up at some point, while the width of that is greater than the max width, or the height is greater than the max height, keep on going. You know what I'm saying to you? So this image here is just going to be equal to the source, whatever got passed in, which, by the way, is like the sprite dim, right? It's like sprite dim by sprite dim here, because that's like, yeah. Although, this actually has like a min, max x and everything. I kind of feel like you'd want to just make the image be that thing. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So anyway, we do a process single tile import or the multi-tile import. This should probably be called multi-tile import. Presumably this takes all the same stuff, except for this. That's probably just going to be like, here's the tags that we're using, which I suppose is probably just that. And the rest of this stuff is probably the same. So, we downsample the image till it fits in whatever our required tile size is there. And I feel like we set that so interestingly enough, we made our texture array 512 by 512, but we shrank everything down by 2. So does that mean it should really have been 256 by 256? Like, it seems like it. I'm not sure about that, but here's what I will say. So the texture array dim is not necessarily something that we want to base our art import on, because we want the HHAs to be the maximum resolution that you might run the game at to support that. So texture array dim might be set to something less than that, right? So I don't really know what we want to do there. That's kind of a tough question. But I guess that's sort of more of a thing that should be defined in the HHA file format, I feel like. I feel like that's something that should be specified in here more. So I don't really know. I'm going to go ahead and set it to 512. Why not? So I'm going to claim that I can go ahead and do this, where I downsample this thing, I send it off for processing, and then I'm done. And basically the exact same thing would happen here. Now, I think that means I can, if I want to, just do this. So I could build another image out of that and just do this here, right? And the grid tags here would be the tags that I would pass, and everything else would just work. This something like that. I don't know what the image is here that we're even using, just image, right? So we could make a thing that says hey, give me the sub image of whatever this is, so we'll just use that separate region. And then we'll pass it to this. That way, multi-tile import and single-tile import are actually the same. And they both just do the downsample to fit, and then they do the rest of the stuff, aspect of it. Hear me. So here we need to be a little bit more specific about how we are doing these dimensions. So in here we need to have something like this. I guess the result gives us that. So we're sort of saying, look, the result width is this thing. Like this. So then what we want to do is divide these. And really, that may be the backwards way to do it. So you might really want to do it like this. And then assign them at the end. You know what I'm saying? And then in here, you're going to loop over whichever ones the new ones. you know? And this one, on the other hand, on the advanced, is going to be on the old ones, you know? And that would downsample it in place and keep going as long as you wanted. And the source pointer just remains the same because the start of the image is always in the same place, so that's fine. But each time through, it would contract, 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 right? And I think that's really all there is to that. I don't think there's much more to it. Right? So this one here, we need to make it, it's going to look like this. And I think this is just like, write image to HHA or something. You know what I mean? And it takes probably all the same stuff. Tags is tags, so it's going to look at that. The align percentage part, we're going to have to make some way of setting the align percentages, and I think we're probably just going to have to set them ourselves. So I don't really know. I'm not sure how we would get that information in any good way. So that's a little bit tough. I mean, I guess what I would say is I feel like if the asset actually already existed, we'd want to use that. And, honestly, it looks like we already did. So it looks like we already did preserve the align percentage. So that's good. So that way we could make a little tool in the game that sets the alignment points and adjusts them. And then it would write it back to the HHA, and we wouldn't have to, if you re-imported the art asset, it would just keep whatever your old align percentage is, which is probably what you want, and then you'd only have to update it again if you actually wanted to change it because the artist had changed what it looked like or something. And that seems good. So when we come in here, when we look at the data size is going to be, we should just make this part of the image, right? There should just be a call that says how big is the image. That seems pretty straightforward. You should be able to just do something like pass me one of these, and it just does, right? And that way I can just say, yeah, how big is the thing we're saving, And then it'll tell me, and then I reserve enough space to store that if I need to, and off I go. Translate the tile index into tags based on the name of the file. Probably using something past 13. We're already doing that. So that to-do is done. It's not relevant anymore. The bitmap dimensions here, we know what they are. And I think that just does it. So image pixels is actually what we would be writing out here. And I think that's it. So I believe that's correct. I don't think there's anything weird about that. So I think we're pretty much good to go. And so that function, write image to HHA, is what we would do in both cases. That's what we would do here. And it's also what we would do here. Well, actually, okay, this calls true, so we don't need to do that. So we're really just down to this guy. And it just needs to take this region. Oops. And so if we have one of these, I guess I don't really need to set it equal in that case. So we know the width is going to be the max x minus the min x, and we know that the height is going to be the max y minus the min y. So, well, you know what? So here's the thing, though. Without a stride, that wouldn't actually work. You know what I'm saying? Because you can't take a slice of an image out if you don't record the fact that the stride was actually different. So it kind of seems like in order to do it that way, we would, we would need to have a way to do stride in there, which we don't. And similarly, I feel like this routine would need that too, right? Because otherwise, it's going to overwrite that part of the image. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily certain we care about that, so I think I might not bother to do it that way. I think I'd just copy it out. Oh, and we do. So I guess I was one ahead of myself, because the thing that I just said I needed to do, we do. Great. I mean, that's very nice. The only thing is, it doesn't copy it out once it knows how big it is, which I kind of feel like is what we would want to do. You know what I'm saying to you? So I feel like this is not really what we would want here. And this should actually be like a separate loop. That's what I say. So I'm thinking that it's more like this. You know? So when we go to process one of these, it actually gets pushed on here. You know what I mean? And this loop does the copy at that point. Now I realize that's a little piggy, you know? But I'm not super certain that there's a reason not to do it that way. Because that way you extract just the part that you actually wanted. The downsample, I suppose, could be made to do that as well, but again, it seems like it overcomplicates things a little bit. So I feel like in here, where we do this, you know, I would just assume do this twice. So when we actually do get one of these, we just do it like this, and we don't need to do any of this work. We're just doing that. And this doesn't do any of this. You know what I mean? So this is strictly a loop to check what the bounds are. This is a loop to write out what we're looking for. And in this case, we're actually going to start at the min x. You know what I mean? And the only thing I think we want to do here is we wanted to have there be some extra space in the image, right? So when we actually go to take it, we wanted to kind of pad it out, right? So I mean, I think we want to adjust these for that purpose. You know what I mean? So I think what we'd want to say here is just that, like, we assume this includes the padding when we actually compute the values. I mean, I think that's what we want. And, you know, we're gonna create this image here to store it, right? Sorry, I just wanna. I should probably just even make one of these, right? I mean, why not? If you want to make an image, you can just do this and say, well, okay. Seem good? That way those are always consistent with each other. And you can just say here, like, what's the arena that you wanted to push them on. That way here I can just say this is push image, and, you know, these are the dimensions. And that should just work, right? Oops. There we go. Okay. So, yeah, moving along. Okay, we'll have to resolve some of those, but I don't really want to look at that just yet. So if we're going to do this, right, we push one of these on there. We've got the pixel buffer now, which we can write to. We could, you know, we probably should have a get pixel pointer thing as well here that we can call on this, where you just give it an X and a Y and it goes. But all I was going to say here was actually that when we've done this border stuff, I think what we want to do here is invert the sense of these and say, look, if it's greater than or equal to border dim, then we're good. We can just subtract border dim from it. If it's not, we issue an error and it's 0. You know what I'm saying? And that means that we'll copy that region, which I think is what we actually want to do there, right? We want to include the border, you know? And I think we weren't doing that. We were extracting without including the border, which is not actually what we wanted to do. So I think this is actually what's supposed to happen. So, you know, again, I guess I should say, since this is the maximum value you can have, if you're less than that, you're fine. If you're not, then you need to, right, set it to 1 minus. Well, no, because we're... That's an interesting question. So in this case, max x is set to what exactly? it's set to the one the pixel you're actually on, not one past the pixel you're actually on. So in this case, yeah, it has to be less than it, and it has to set it. But what that means is that in here, where we do max and min, it's actually a +1, right? Because we're saying the max x and the max y are actually not, they would both be set to the same value if there's one pixel, which means that when you subtract the two, you'll get 0, but you really wanted to represent a width of 1. So that is why, like, I have to add 1 in that part of it, if that makes sense. Of course, now I think about it, that's still not right for this part. What I actually want to do here is say, I guess this is, yeah, this is that. What I really want to say here is, look, if it's less than that, then you can increment it. If it's not, then you actually need whatever that tile dim is, and this this tile dim here, right? It needs to be that -1. So another part of the problem here is these aren't right either, because we need to do the top corner of the image plus that. So we actually need this as well, right? If that makes sense. We need like that plus this to step to the tile. And similarly for min x, we need this, right? So we need to step to the x and y index tile and then into the min x, min y, I believe, because these are actually not absolute. They're relative, you know, for whatever that's worth. So, all right, so when that does the scan, off we go. And this needs to happen in the y exactly the same way. So if it's greater than the border dim here, then that's fine. We can just subtract the border dim. Otherwise, it's got to be 0. Maybe I'll put that first, since might as well put the action first and put the error message second. And then again, same thing here. If we're within the tolerance there, we'll just set our max y, to be out by however much the border is. Otherwise, we have to set it till the tile dim -1. Which is, you know, the furthest out we can set it. Yet another way to, there's probably a better way to do that too. Another way to do it is to inflate all of these and then test, but you know, 6 1/2 does the other. And this one means you can use a U32 instead of an S32, so that seems good. So that should extract to a separate image and then process. When we process single tile import, we need to be able to specify the source in terms of the import tiles, which means we need the x index and the y index to get passed here. So when we process single tile import, we will pass in these are tile x index and tile y index, right? And those won't actually take on any value of importance when we're doing just one, but when we're going from a grid, they're just there to store which part of the grid it came from. You know what I mean? So in here, right, this part has that stored. And this too. Let's see what else we got. These are just naming differences. Let's see. And these are just that. So the grid tag array information here really is stuff that should probably be separated, so it could be passed as a separate thing, is what I'm guessing. So in here where we have the, like this stuff, this should be like import source info or something. Something like that. So that information comes off of like another thing that we could fill out separately as necessary. And really, maybe would be more appropriate to not have it on there at all, and you just pass it separately, right? So something like this, where you've got the tags and the info, and off you go, right? So let's see here. We want to pass those two things when we write things to HHA, which means that they would have to be passed here as well, like so. And so that looks like this. And that means this would also take one of those. And whenever it calls through to process the import, it's going to pass that info as well, right? So the grid tag array, I'm not sure where it actually sets that information. I'll be honest, I'm not sure what we're doing here. I mean, it doesn't even look like we set any of that stuff. So we didn't set the name, the description, or the author, right? We basically set nothing. So I think this was just kind of a hack to test whether that thing was working. And it doesn't really look like we did anything with it, right? So I think, yeah, like we just never did anything here other than test it, which is what this was. And so, I mean, this is about all we would have had, is that. So we want to actually start filling that out. I think we've got most of the flow right now on that import. We have source image. What else? Pixel buffer. For downsample, yeah. So in this case, we're trying to downsample from result pixels. We don't need to convert those to U32s, however. And same here. I think that's all good. Pixel buffer dest pixel. This is tile image pixels. And that should work as well, I think. I hope. Process tile import identifier not found. That's true. We can pass the info along here. And now we sort of have to do, when we do update package from PNG, is we're going to have to make this thing know what's going on. Now, we should probably just test the code path that we have right now because they made a substantial number of changes and probably broke some things. So we probably should just step through there. I should probably compile in debug mode as well. And just make sure that's working first. But then I think we're ready to go because I think that actually, yes, like I said. So I think we want to just get that debug cleaned up. And then I think we're ready to go with a single tile import, so we can just call that and pass it the tags that we want to associate with it, and that will put things on the walls like we wanted. And I think that's basically it. So I think that's the work we needed to do. So let's just go ahead and debug it, and then I think we're, we're done with that. And we'll have to move on to the next step, which is getting the other things. But we've got plenty of debugging to do here, so let's just go ahead and get that going. So let's start by looking at what we ended up with here. So we came through here, and I was saying, we need to get a tiled image that can extract these things. And so it looks like we did that okay. So here's our tiled image, 840 by 704. So, does it make sense or doesn't it? Looking at these bounds here, it certainly makes sense. That looks like how big of an image we would have wanted to a certain degree, right? So that seems fine. And the question here is, we're not faulting on the read. So we got the source code. We're faulting on the write. So, what's going wrong? Well, this one's a little bit of a fish in a barrel probably, because you can see, I just didn't update the routine to actually step over the image that we're working with. It's still using tiledim, which is no longer applicable because I'm now actually extracting the rectangle, not just an arbitrary tile dimension. And so, there's not a lot of mystery to why that wouldn't work, because it's just totally wrong. So if we actually step over the image itself and do it that way, then in theory we should be in better shape, at least as far as the crashing is concerned. So let's try that out. And it's a little bit hard for us to see whether something worked or not, but we'll find out, I guess. So it looks like it actually did work, to be honest, because that's it, right? So it's close to working, but what I will say is it does not seem to have associated things quite right, because it should show different directions, and it doesn't look like it's showing different directions right now. So I'm not certain it actually did do quite what it should have done. And we probably want to take a look at that a little more carefully. One thing I would be interested in is whether or not that's an offset problem. I'm curious here. So I think we're reading from the right place, though, because if we look at where we're reading here, image.pixels, we are offsetting by the tile dimensions and then by the rectangle area that we want to extract. So it does seem in general that there's nothing weird going on there, right? That all seems totally fine. Yeah. And then when we do this and we do our downsample, and come through here. So how are we passing the tags? So we did properly extract the tags, right? And we're going to use those on this thing properly, it would seem. So yeah. I can't say I really see why that would be failing. I want to take a quick look at the hand here. So just looking at what the image actually is, I want to open it actually in GIMP so I can see without all the Microsoft nonsense going on there. I'd like to see what the image looks like in terms of the, yeah, okay. So it looks like, let's just take a quick look at which one we're getting out of these four. So there are more than one of them, right? Happening there. So when I push up, I am getting the one presumably that, well, actually, do I? I don't know which one of those is supposed to be the up direction, to be completely honest with you. Let me look at the cheat sheet. Because we had a template in here, right? So it should be that one. So it's down, left, up, right. Or I guess from the top down, it's like right, up, left, down. Right, up, left, down. So let's see. Right should be that one. And it's actually is that one, but it's upside down. Right? Down. So it looks like they're just upside down. Right? So it does look like it's picking the right ones, but it looks like they're upside down. Which, I'll be honest, I don't actually know which way we were orienting this thing in the first place. Like, I have no idea what the rotation on the hand even was. So that's a little bit difficult to even say. But we may have a problem there where we're interpreting the PNG like the wrong way around. You know what I'm saying? So there's some other things about this, just real quick. I probably will move on to the room-based stuff and then solve this a little bit later. But there's another thing about this that's a little bit squirrely. Which is maybe the resizing really shouldn't do what I'm doing. Maybe we should just only resize a fixed number of times. And the reason is because if some of these can shrink more, have to shrink more than others, then the sizing that we use, they'll be off. So we need to kind of shrink them all by the same amount, if you will. And so, yeah, like I may want to change the downsample to fit part of things and say that downsample to fit actually maybe shouldn't do this, and instead should just do the twice. To do Casey, should we really do the downsample to fit? Because it seems like that is actually bad. For like the things, you know, just it seems like, yeah, it seems like we need to do this a little bit differently. So what I'm thinking is maybe we say what those dimensions actually are. So do we have a v2u in this code base? I don't really remember. No. We don't. What I want to do is basically ask what the dimensions of a thing would be. Like, so I want to do a thing here that would say something like, oh, well, actually, like I basically want to ask how many times to downsample something and then maybe pass that in. So maybe what I want to do is this. Get downsample count, you know, and say, all right, you know, you say that, and you say, you say, look, you don't need to downsample it at all. We're going to keep going here. We'll say width equals source width, height equals source height. We'll just say keep going until you hit the desired amount. And this could be done we could do this in closed form, but instead we'll just do a loop. Like we could just instead do a scan. And say, look, how many times are we going to have to downsample this thing in order to fit in there? Then we can just say, like, that's how many times we want to downsample it so that we can downsample to fit if we want. But we'll just say, actually, I can just say, look, downsample, and this is how many times we want to downsample. So then here, this is just like, all right, for downsample index equals 0, downsample index less than downsample count, plus downsample index, go nuts, and it'll just do that many downsamples, right? That seems a little bit better because then now we have the opportunity to be more specific. If we say process tile import here and we do the downsample to fit inside the sprite thing, instead of doing it that way, we could say instead, we know how much we want to downsample ahead of time, and we're going to use that or something, right? And so I'm going to take the opportunity here to just go, that is going to be different between the two paths now, so we're going to do them separately. And so this one will actually do the downsample to fit call by asking, what was it? Get downsample count for fit, maybe? So here we're just going to say, yeah, look, you need to tell us how to fit this thing in. And then we're going to do that. So that'll do that. And then we'll process it. We don't need these because they're always 0. Right? So single tile import does that. But the multi-tile import needs to scale all of these things the same way. So what it's going to do instead is say downsample this thing always 2 times, because that's our definition of what you would do, right? Another way to say that would be downsample it to make sure that you fit this thing, but just based on the import tile dim. So instead we could say, look, the downsample count is based on this. So if you were going to try to fit an example image, right? So something that was the tile dim, right? Just the test image. Maybe we'll call this size test. So if you were going to try and do the size test image, how many times would you have to sample that down in order to get to what would fit? And then we will sample everybody by that. And that way all of the sprites shrink uniformly, and you won't get one of them that happens to just have a shape that fits better sampling differently, which is what I didn't want to have happen, right? So we can get rid of this now and say this is that, this is that, and these are those. And then we've got both paths, right? So I think that's okay. I don't think there's anything else in particular we need to worry about there. And off we go. So downsampling here is the tile image, not the source image. And actually, this is not the tile image, it's the dest image. Right. I think that's all good. We'll see in a second. So let me go ahead and just verify that that works at all. Let me del local HHA and then create one. I am a little concerned that everything's upside down, like I said originally. So I think we may have a bug in terms of how we're interpreting our images. But that's, neither here nor there. So now what I'd like to do is go ahead and import those the block. That's what I'm looking for. I want to import those blocks that go on the orphanage walls, right? So here we've got a multi-tile import. We now know we also have the ability to do a single tile import, and that's what's going to happen with these because they don't obey that same tiling process. So if we were going to have one of those come in here, it would look basically the same. But again, it would just use one of the tags here. And so this, I'm not really sure why we don't just have this welded in there. I think we would want to. And so here's one thing, maybe I did was a little hasty there. So if we always wanted to just pass a grid tag array and it just only has one in the 0,0 slot, that might simplify our lives here a little bit. but I'm just not sure how I feel about it. I'm going to go ahead and say let's not bother with this garbage right now anyway. I would like to know what the result here is for, because no one's using it. So that doesn't really make a lot of sense either. So I would say that if that's what we're doing, let's just paste this in here. And so if we make a read stream here, I want to just have some way of taking this and using it. We have pretty much all of the things that we actually needed. The import grid tags part of this is just exactly right. The file part, I think, just works probably. And yeah, that seems like it would just work. And so what we really need to do is just have the way of differentiating between these based on the name. So file buffer is the thing that goes right here, I believe. I'm not sure where that's coming from, though. Let me back this out one level so I can look at exactly what we were passing down there. So we're passing contents is file buffer, right? So we want file buffer to be what we made the read stream out of. The asset source file is match. Right? So in here, the asset source file that we're calling is actually that. The image is always image, and the temporina is temporina. Makes sense. So if we just get rid of this now, it's just down to that. And we paste that in. And I think because the temporina is actually something we constructed here, it's got to be addressed there. Similarly, the tags has to be and tags, like so. And so now the big problem is just that single tile import, we need to actually determine which of these we're going to do, right? But if we actually just compile now, we should be fine. In theory, anyway. And content stream temporina, that needs to be an address, and I think then we're good. So yeah, so now the question is just, as we go through each of these, what we now need to do is actually make this tag stuff do something useful. So yeah, for starters, the import source info, we know that's the same the whole time. So really that's just up here. And what we need to get there is just some idea of, of where we would get, you know, name, description, and author, right? And unfortunately, we don't really have a way of doing that. We could use the username of the person as the author. In terms of the name, of the asset, like a lot of the stuff we just don't have. And, you know, it could be things that's annotated after the fact, but I mean, yeah, like I don't really know what to make of that. I think we just were kind of overly, you know, we wanted, and I agree with this. Still, we wanted to make sure you could put stuff into the HHAs to annotate them. So, you know, for each of the assets, you can name it, have a description, and have an author. But we don't really have that for any of these things. We could name them something based on the file name. We aren't going to get a description out of it, so I would say description is probably not on the table. The author is going to be Anna Repberg for anything that we are importing here. So we kind of know what that is, but we don't really know, like, we don't know that if someone else was running the game. And I'm not sure how they would articulate to us who it was who did the artwork in the first place. And I would assume the PNG doesn't have that information either. Which is not great. The username, you know, is something. I don't know. And so the rest of it could be sort of in here as a specializer of some kind. I don't know. I mean, I'd like to have a way to stamp those accurately, but I just don't know how to do it. Because, I mean, who knows? Like, that information is just not there. And so we could have something that, like, stamps that information on after the fact with, like, a tool or something. But in terms of having it automatically happen on import, there's just no way to know. Like, I have no idea how I would get that. It would be nice, but it's not really realistic, I don't think. So I don't know. I guess I'll leave that for now and just say to do, how are we going to do this eventually? Do we pop up a dialog box and ask? You know? Like, who made this art asset that you're importing? I don't know. So this part, on the other hand, we might be able to do something about. So we'll leave that for a second. Do we have a wrap Z in here? Yeah. So yeah, like, you know, that part's a little squinky, but that's just how it goes sometimes. So we then want to go ahead and figure out the tag situation, right? And so here's, I guess, how we'll do this. Let's start parsing out these things. So of the things we've got, block, character, cover, hand, item, obstacle, and title screen. So title screen is just a bad name. So I'm going to rename title screen, and I'm going to rename it to something that will actually allow us to know what it is. So I'm going to call it a plate, right? And so what a plate is a plate is something that's just like a cutscene thing, or just something that just gets splatted on the screen that doesn't have anything else associated with it in terms of a structure. right? So we don't know what it is. We just know it's a big image, and we are not going to subdivide it up or think of it like a mapped cube or separate tiles or anything, right? So we're going to have block, character, cover, hand, item, or obstacles or plate, right? And that's what we're going to do. So in here, what I'm going to do is do this strings equals pieces and do this sort of decryption on it. Now, I don't really want this to be giant inside this nonsense inside this routine. So what I'm going to do instead is put that decryption of the name in here, and I should say parsing of the name. It's not encrypted. I'm going to put that in a separate function just so it doesn't get out of hand, because it's going to be this huge like disentanglement of art specific stuff, right? So we're going to have something in here that looks like that, you know. And what I want to do in here is say, let's do an if on, you know, parse pieces. And that will like write into our tags array and into our info array. So we can basically parse out like what the heck it is we're doing. You know what I mean? And so we'll start with that, and we have a little bit more we need to do here because we need also for it to tell us how big the thing is. So again, like I said, we might want to kind of change a little bit of how I was doing it. I may have jumped the gun a little bit there, but we'll fix it. Don't worry. So once we get in here, we just need a thing that will decrypt these properly. So if we've got, you know, parse pieces, that's going to return a Boolean, and the Boolean is just like, you know, can I import this? Do I even know what the heck it is, right? And if I don't, then we just don't, right? And maybe we put an error in there somewhere where we're just like, look, I don't know what the heck this thing is. And maybe that actually goes in here, right? So maybe there's like an error stream that we write to, and that error stream, you know, we can report our errors when we parse things. So in here, we're going to have into our error stream, we're going to write like unrecognized type of import artwork. And when we look and we see these pieces, we can now enumerate the ones that we actually care about. So there's block. There's character. There is cover. Hand. Item. Obstacles. And plate. And, you know, since these have different import processes that kind of have to go along with them there, this does not belong here anymore. Wait, where did hand come? I deleted hand. No! Okay, it's right here. So if we look at the parse pieces thing, we would want to see which kind of thing it was and how we needed to import it. And we possibly need to switch on that. So we may have to do something like this. Do you know what I mean? So we would want to be able to say, here's the multi-tile one, here's the single tile one. There's also the plate one where we get, you know, one of these things that doesn't get resized, like we just take it, or maybe it does get resized, but it doesn't get resized to those limits. You know what I mean? So there's basically like one more of these that's the least processed version that basically says if you get this, we don't downsample, or we downsample only once. Like, what's the res on this thing? Yeah, so we downsample like one time, you know, on those. So here we do something like asset max plate dim, you know, and it would do its thing there. And, you know, maybe that's the maximum plate dim. I don't know. So I think that's roughly what we're looking for. And since all of those now fall in line with that, the next thing we just have to do is actually provide some tagging ability for each of these things, right? Now what I can do is make these pieces return something like, import type here. And we can have, one of the import types is multi-tile. One of the import types is single tile. And one of the import types is plate. And then, of course, there's like import type none. You know what I mean? So here, it can return one of these. And that way it just kind of knows what it's dealing with. So that way when we do the import, it'll say like, okay, which kind should I import? And we can make sure that everything's set up properly for that, and off we go. So in this case, if we want to allow hands to be imported, then what we can do is say import type multi-tile, and that's what it will, that's the path that it will try to take, right? And when we do this parse pieces, we've got sort of the stuff that's getting set here, the destination info and the destination tag array. Those will get set. We then need the piece stuff, which is this, and piece count. I don't think we care about. So I think that's all fine. And then let me see what we got here. That asset struct it's got to be able to grab. So I think we can make that be the locus of the parsing. As far as errors are concerned, when you actually get one of these files, it just has a stream for that. So we can just pass a stream. And so then when we call this function, we need to pass the assets, the pieces, and the errors for that particular one, like so. And then in here, what we actually want to do is like, use this thing where we say, what's the import type? And we ask it, like so, and it tells us. So then in here, we can just say, look, if we were supposed to import it, then we will. And I think that should do it. In this case, the tags, we only have one of them. So when we import that, we really just want to use tag 00. So, and the same would be true here. I'm not sure what the other thing it was complaining about was. Looks like nothing. So that would import all of the different hands in theory. And we can already kind of maybe look at that as a reason why we need to start thinking a little harder about how this... I mean, we want, when this imports hands now, to be able to select the hand that we actually wanted using tags, right? And so we want to be able to do that, and right now we can't actually do that. So that's definitely something we want to improve. Yeah, so... So we need to make it a little bit more, we need to make it a little easier here to define what all these tags are. And I'm not sure exactly how we want to do that. Like, I don't really want to have to define these all in different places, but it seems like that would be the only really way to... you know, you could just redefine them here every time, because you're going to have to anyway, so I guess you just do begin tag array, end tag array, and you just do it right in here is the best way to do it. Because you're going to have to do that anyway, based on the way that I kind of wanted it to work out going forward. All right, so let's actually do the hands then, because I want to do it. We got to do this for the blocks and for the hands. So we've got like a fire hand, a glove hand, right, and a skeleton hand. And so what I want to do is I want to have these, instead of naming themselves that way, I want them to sort of just have the tags in the file name. You know what I mean? And this, again, is the part that I say is so delicate, really. But you'll have to just bear with me here. So let's suppose that we wanted to talk about this, right? So the first thing I'll say is that's not really fire, even if it was, right? Like, it's more like undead energy or something. And furthermore, this would probably not really be that way. Like, we'd probably get rid of those, and like I'd probably have Anna remove that, and we'd probably just do that with a particle system so that it would animate. But regardless of that part of it, let's just assume, because we still need the interior piece, which is like the little like solid part that's just floating there. So let's suppose that we were going to do that. Like, I don't know what that stuff is. It's like dark energy or something, right? It's like some kind of like necro energy. So this is really like dark energy 1. Like that's a hand that has dark energy of 1. That's what that looks like. And I don't know that, you know, how else to really talk about it, but, you know, another way to say it would be fingers 0. Right? Like this is one that doesn't have any fingers. And it has dark energy. This one is has a glove and it has fingers, right? I'm sorry. This one has fingers. And it doesn't have any flesh, right? So it's like it's got bones but no flesh. I'm not sure how you would necessarily specify that. Probably just the fact that it has bones. So I guess another way to say this would be a little bit different. That's, I don't know what that really is other than like, you know, it's this dude, his little floating hand. And so I'm not really sure what you call that, you know? You know, maybe I'll just call it bones. And so that one's just bones. That's all it's got. This one's got a glove. And maybe that's really all it's got too, right? I mean, it doesn't have anything else that we could really say about it. Although I guess, like I said, we could say that the glove has individual fingers is one way to talk about that glove, so I don't know. So those are just some examples of ways I could name things. And if we always wanted to have them be 1, we could omit that. Meaning if they're just binary tags and we don't like have like a certain amount of them really, then you could so I suppose another way to do that would be like, you know, you could just do it like this and say if you wanted to add a number you can, you don't have to. Right? And so then when we instantiate an entity, if we added the property to the entity and said, you know, this entity has you know, this entity has a glove and fingers, it's going to pick this one because that's the one that it has. If you didn't say fingers and just said glove, it'd still pick that one because it doesn't have any other options to use. But if you drew another one here that was a glove that didn't have fingers, it would pick that one instead, right? And so I think that's roughly what we want. I think. So then in here where we say block, you know, again, I'm really not quite sure what the level of asset type should really be. I don't want what just happened at all. I hate this file explorer. There we go. I'm like, I don't want any of that. I guess I just, yeah, I don't know. So in terms of the basic category, right, if we stop looking at the legacy categories, although hand is still a valid one, you know, it could be that we literally are talking about this. Maybe that does stay in here, but you know, maybe a block is just a block, and we don't, like, it's literally just the things that are on there. Right? It's literally these things. And I don't know. So, you know, we've got block, item, character, cover, item, plate, and obstacle. And maybe you don't actually do this. So everything you instantiate just has to have the right properties to pick something from the set. You know? And so for characters, they're just in two halves. So you got the bottom and the top, which is really just head and torso, right? Are the two parts there. So really we don't need that. So we're really talking about this and this and this. Will still be used, at least for the time being, right? So will those. At least temporarily. The rest of this stuff would not be used. And so then the like basic category is just which one of those things you were trying to say what that you were using, because they sort of have different formats to a certain extent. But that's basically it. And then when you parse them in, it just uses the back part of the name. So it just says like, okay, you know, parse this stuff, and that's what it is. I don't know. And so if we did it that way, then, you know, then you've got the tags that try to specify what's going on. And so, you know, the tag array, which is this stuff, that then gets all of the other things in it. So basically you would have in here all the stuff I just said. So there's something that's like, does it have bones? Does it have dark energy? Does it have glove? Miss? Does it have fingers? And, you know, whatever else we add. And that's what we would do, right? And those are just the properties that we'd add, and they would just go into the game, and you would just add new properties as you want them to distinguish between things that you feel like need to be distinguished in a different way than ways that are already currently in existence, right? So I think that's what you would do. So this just ends up being one past last tag index plus 2. So there's 2 dir tags, I guess, in the thing. So basically this just has to be something a little bit better, and then I think we're mostly done, right? So what you need to do here is you just need to say, I'm going to add whatever the tag is, and, you know, it's always type ID equals asset hand. And then in here, we just need to say what the tag set is. Let's just real quick look at what that is inside the info structure here. So if this is an import grid tag, then I think what we want to do is just say, okay, well, I mean, I guess I can leave that as it is, but we're just going to say tag equals end tags or something. And we just say like, okay, begin tags, you know, add tag, whatever, right? Something like this, end tag, and it's a hand, right? And then this will set everything up for us. So we need to sort of do this where we just like, here's the tags that we're adding to this thing. Begin and end them and go from there, right? So I think that's all we really need to do. And you know, again, this can all sort of be done ahead of time and then just referenced. Sort of. Well, no, it can't, because you're reading it from the file name. So assuming that you're actually going to do it that way, then you do need to do begin end tags. You need to add the individual tags, and the tags need to come from whatever the pieces are that you're actually processing here, right? So the direction tag in this case, we can get rid of sort of the thing that was doing the dir tags bit. And what we want to do here is just say this is the actual set of tags that we wanted to make. And so the y-index is the thing that tells us here which one we're actually trying to do. So we're talking about this, right? And off we go. So let's think about this for a second. That tag is facing direction. Its value is this. Its basic category is asset hand. Oh, so wait, if that's already set, I guess we just have to set it in two places, which is kind of annoying, but we can wrap that into the end tags bit, so that's really not the end of the world. So when we begin the tags here, we just have to make sure that we know how many we need, which shouldn't be too hard, and then we can just push them on and finish, right? Yeah. And that should be it. So let's go ahead and make that happen. I want to make like an end tags here. And that would be what would actually do this stuff. And it would also be what would actually set this stuff. And it would return that. So you basically have an import grid tag that's like the result here. You would be returning it. Inside here, you'd want to say, look, the type ID of this thing is whatever type ID you told me. It's also the type ID that I would set here as the basic category. We could be more explicit and say that's actually a category because that's really what it is now. The first tag index and the one past last tag index are going to be based on how many we actually used. And in here where we do our end tags, you're going to have to pass in whatever that category actually was. So this is an asset basic category. And then we just need like some little builder thing that lets us know how many of these tags we actually used. So then we can do begin tags, end tags. We can pass asset hand there, right? We can add the tags for facing direction as we go. So this would actually look like this. Right? And we're really only doing 4 of these at the moment. So I don't know why we decided to do that there, but let's do this, right? So we're going to take one of these and divide out the rotation amount. I really don't like that. I think that was a dumb idea. By the way, I think it should just be 0 to 1, but we'll talk about that some other time. So anyway, when we actually go in here to do the begin tags, we would add the facing direction tags. It would automatically add the category tag and know what that was. And so then the only other tags we need to add now are the ones that we actually parsed out, right? So they're the things that actually, you know, come from the pieces structure, right? So in here, we don't need any of this anymore, although this may be something that we need to kind of put up here in begin tags. And we're going to have to figure out how to deal with some of that, so it's fine. But essentially what we're doing is this, and we want to add the tags that we know we want to add based on the template. And then we also want to add the tags from the rest of the parse, right? And so the way that this works, you can kind of see here where we're looping through this, and we're doing that scan for underscores, and then we update the string hash value nonsense stuff, right? So probably we really don't want to do that anymore. Like, we probably want to let this thing parse, and we probably want to have it parse slowly and piggily, just to make things a little bit easier on ourselves. So I guess what I'd say about that is this part should probably go, and so the piece count stuff should probably not really be a thing. When we go to do the parse pieces, what we'd want to do here is actually just send in the file itself, the full file name, I think. So that's... Yeah, I mean, that's just, it's like what we're doing here, right? We want to just kind of say, look, you can parse the whole thing yourself. And we're just going to do it many times, and it's going to be piggy, and it's fine. So I would say, yeah, like, since this is only on import, I'm fine with it being piggy for now. So I would say we just have a thing here that's like, hey, let's parse the thing that we get. As it comes in. I don't know what we want to call that. But we'll first parse it to get this stuff out, and then go, you know, further from there. So the way I'd like to do that is I'd like to say probably something like this. So I'd like to do something where we read a token out of the file name and then use it. Something like that. So we kind of grab pieces out of the text as we go. And then in here where we do sort of begin tags, maybe we just say, look, parse the rest of this thing. And add all those in, you know what I mean? And then we'll add any additional tags that we want to add on top of it, and then we'll close it off, right? That seems reasonable to me. And so when we go through parsing these out, we'll just say, yeah, you know, there's a way to grab the next one of these off of the list. And, you know, there's a thing in here that just has whatever the text of the thing is. And we don't have to really think about it too much harder than that at the moment, but we'll probably make this a little bit better once we go to do like sort of something a little more real. But what we can do here is just say, you know, there's a source, and the source is going to get advanced by scanning for the next whatever, right? In this case, we'll just use underscores like we were, and then we're going to return. So when we, you know, parse this forward, what we do is say, use the same construction we were using before to scan, you know, through it. Actually, I guess we don't do that, because here we actually know. So we kind of know what the index is, now that I think about it. Right? So as we scan through here, we just say, look, if the one we're on is an ending piece, and we don't have to check for this anymore, because we would know when we got there, right? So if we see that we've got one of these, then we just remember it, right? And we say the result is just going to be however many in we are, right? And the data is just going to be the same as whatever the source was. You know what I'm saying? And then we can exit. If we, well, and then we can update the source right in there as well. So then we would say, well, the source count is going to be less by however many this thing was, plus the one we're on. And the data is going to be the same, right? So the source is going to go, the size is going to go down by that much, and the data will go forward by that much. And then here what we would do is say, well, actually, I guess we don't even have to say it. We can just do this. So if we never find an underscore, we just return whatever the input is and advance by that much at the end, right? So what we could do is say something like this, which is to say that, look, whatever we find will advance by that. And the only time we won't do that is if there wasn't any advancement to actually make, right? Although I guess that doesn't quite work in the case where you just have like a set of underscores. So I guess what you would have to say there is just like, look, if the source had a count, then whatever we're going to do here, do it, right? And if it didn't, then just return it. And I think that does the right thing. So that allows us to just keep going. And I suppose if we then didn't want to do anything fancy with the tokens, we could actually make these just be strings themselves and keep it simple. I'm not really sure I want that because I might want to have numbers in there, like I said. So I think I want to do that probably. And then just what we'll do pretty much always when we return is just actually set that value to 1, and we'll deal with that later. So I want to do this, and then we'll just return those as we go. So as you pop things off the string, it just goes ahead and gives you back those values, and then you can parse them incrementally and have a little bit of a party, right? So I think that's mostly what we would need to do, and I don't think there's really anything much else to it. So then in here, what I want to do is I would like to parse it. So when we actually pop that off and then we use it later, in here what I can do is just sort of loop through and say something like that. So these are the tags. I'll keep grabbing tokens off the tag string. If the name token has a count, we're good. Otherwise, we bail. And in here, we can look for the different kinds of tags that we have. You know what I mean? So really what we do here is just say, we'd probably make one of these sort of things that's just like a tag mapping. So we'd probably say something like tag, like named tag, like a name tag, right? So we'd have a name and we'd have an asset tag associated with it, right? So inside wherever that tag array is, asset tag ID. We'd have something, and this is again why C and C++ are very bad. They have no way of just generating this. It should just be directly created from here, right? But hey, 40 years is a long time to figure out that language is supposed to have introspection in them, so what are you gonna do? So here's our name tags, and what I want to do is just say which are the ones that we've got. At the moment, I'm just going to say that we have these, and I'm just going to give them those actual names. Now, I don't actually want to do repz because this is actually a string constant. So if you look at something like this, I actually want the constant version that just defines it in place. I just want this to be a table that's compiled, and I don't want to call anything. So I just want it to look like that, right? And so in here where we say, like bones would be a tag that comes in there, right? And so here, what do we call it? Just dark energy. And maybe you don't even need to call it dark energy. Maybe we should just call it dark. You know what I'm saying? And so that just gives us a way of translating between these two in some way that we can easily add to, because we're going to have a lot of these. So let's suppose that it's just that. And so dark is just dark energy. And we, again, don't have to be one-to-one. Like if we wanted to, we could allow either of those in case you just forget which one is which, right? And so what we want to do here is just say this array of tags, we want to figure out which one it is. And so what we can say is just look, give us a way of switching between those, right? So tag ID from, here's the string. We just do a for I loop over the ones that we've got. And you'll notice that you couldn't do this if you just used an array that had the same index as each of the things. So if we just made a mirroring thing with the strings, it's not as powerful. So you kind of want this to actually have a mapping so that you can have more than one string defined for every ID, because you might just want to have a quick way of saying, oh, the artist typed gloved instead of glove. Let's just accept that as glove instead of forcing people to rename files for no reason, right? And so in here, we're just going to say if strings are equal. I don't know if we have a lowercase. Looks like we don't. But we would probably do lowercase here if we had it. We'll just say, hey, if the strings are equal, then that's the tag ID. There's got to be a none, said the priest. Or there doesn't. Wow. What? How did we not have a 0 tag ID, people? Who is responsible for this? That is super terrible. Not a fan of that. Not a fan at all. I'm going to do this here because it'll work, but I would like that to be 0. Okay, it's not 0. Oh well. So we do result here, and we do the name tags for whichever the one is that we're on, and we return that ID. That gives us a way to decrypt that, right? And so all we're doing here is just saying if the name you gave us matches the name in the table, then we return it. Otherwise, we have no idea what it is, so don't ask us. So in here, when we say we're going to begin these tags, we're just going to go ahead and parse them one at a time. And when we see each individual name token come out, we're just going to ask you to tell us what it is, please, right? Because the only things that we're going to understand at this point is the ones that are in that table. Like maybe in the future we'll do other stuff, but at the moment we definitely don't. So what we want to do is say, give us a tag ID. If the tag ID is not equal to tag none, then we can process it. Otherwise, maybe we give an error, maybe we don't. I don't really know how we want to deal with that. My inclination is to say that we don't recognize the tag name. And maybe we even print out the tag name. I don't know. That's maybe getting a little saucy. But, we could do it potentially. I think outf lets us do this, so it would be that, right? Right? The problem with it is we don't actually, the problem with it is we don't actually have, like, we want to be able to just print out length strings in the outf, right? that we're looking at there, like in here, you know. So like our format string list, you know, it's got all this mumbo jumbo in there, and when we print things out, you know, we can do it looks like we can do that, right? We can actually read it in that way if we want to. Another thing we could do is add something here that is designed to print those specifically. But it looks like we could do that. So if we wanted to, again, there we can just say like, all right, well, you know, print it out. There it is. The problem with that is that strings themselves this is too large, right? So it would not properly, this will not properly get converted to a 32-bit value because it's a 64-bit value, and it wouldn't get downcast. So what you, again, have to do is you have to like remember here. This is why, again, C and C++, terrible at this. If you want to have a way, and do not say IO streams, because that doesn't solve this problem. IO streams are a different way of doing things, but if you actually want to have a function that just takes a variable number of parameters, there's no way to push the types of those parameters on before the types without doing a lot of really disgusting stuff. Because again, I don't know who works on C++, but they are off in some la-la land where people don't actually program stuff for a living. So anyway, we can do that, but it's a little ugly. So if we were going to print out strings, we should add, you know, because that's just too error prone, in my opinion. Anyway, so if we look at what this is doing, assuming that the tag ID that we have on there is actually valid, then we can go ahead and do an add tag. And we know the tag ID, and the name token gives us the value. Like so. So mostly then what we have to do is just actually figure out the right way to build this tag array. And yeah, you know, for every tag and value that we have, we need some way of actually pushing it on there. What is asset? Oh, yep, that's, don't need to say that twice. Yeah. All right. So I think mostly what we've got to do now is just make sure that we've got everything we need to actually add arrays of tags, if that makes sense. Not sure why I'm not able to jump to error there. There we go. This is actually an array lookup. And I think that should do it. Now, when we are parsing these, we do want, I think, an error stream to be passed in. So we also need the assets structure, because without it, we would not be able to reserve any tags, right? So we got to do that as well. This part here we haven't done yet, but I just want to preserve it for posterity. So we need to have this obey the standard way we're looking at it, and this is, you know, whatever this is. Do that in a second. And I think that should be okay. So this we know is 4, and I think that's everything. So we've got begin tags. And we've got everything else. This just has to be name token text. And then we've got a nice little way to read everything from the file name and go from there. Parse pieces in this case. I don't really want it to pass the address of a string. What was it trying to do there? Oh. So that's not an actual string. It's just a char star. But I would like it to be a string, so I want to capture that into a string for it to use, right? Like so. So I'm just going to do that. So that gets us down to where we're within striking distance of having the parsing work. We just need the tags to actually be a thing, right? So asset and errors here. We've got errors and we've got assets, so we just do this. So really all we're talking about is how do we do the addition, right? How do we do the addition here? And so we kind of want to do like a little builder thing, I think. And maybe what we could do here is just say, look, we know there's only so many tags we're going to allow on here. So we could just cheese out and say, like, that's how it works, right? Like, we could just say, buffer them up, then do a reserve, then go. Or we could just stream them out. I'm really not sure which one of those two I want to do. Let's just stream them out for now, maybe. And I guess the other thing is we may not want to allow the import to complete in cases where we don't recognize like the tags or something. I guess we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So when we do a begin tag, add tag, in this case, I'm gonna say like maybe there's just a little builder here that goes on, right? And so maybe, you know, that is something that you pass in at the head end, or maybe not. I'm not sure. But let's say it looks something like that. And maybe furthermore, it looks something like that. So we've got a little thing here. This is the tag builder doodad. And it's something that just makes this easy. Inside here, we're just going to store the stuff that we actually need. So probably the assets, probably the first tag index, and probably the tag output. something like this. So when you actually send one of these down and you want to add a tag, what it's going to do is something like this, right? It's going to say, give me the tag for the current tag index, and then go ahead and increment that, right? Then set that tag's stuff to whatever it should be, right? So for some reason, we seem to have deleted the code where we were setting tags before, but it's pretty straightforward. It's just an ID and a value, right? So if we quick look at what one of those looks like. Yeah, so it's just an ID and a value. So if it's just an ID and a value, we just assign them. Off we go. And then we go ahead and, well, I guess we don't even have to return the tag, right? So the only thing we have to do here is issue an error if we can't, right? So we need to check to make sure that we can actually write. But if we can write, then we're done. In here where we do the begin tag stuff, this has to actually set that up. So this is the tag builder here. The tag builder, well, I guess I'll call this builder. In this case, is going to store the assets because we're going to need that. It's going to store the first tag index, which comes from here. And I don't know that I actually want to do reserve tags. So I think this is going to have to be more a special purpose than that, right? So in this case, we've got reserve tags as a function here, which looks to see whether it can actually do this, but we're actually going to do this as a two-step process. So what we're actually going to do here is say, look, the first tag is the tag count. That's just what's going down. We know what the max tag count is, so here we're just going to say, look, if the max tag count would allow us to write this thing, so if the tag count's less than the max tag count, go nuts. Otherwise, maybe not, right? Sorry, cur tag index. Otherwise, no dice, right? And so here, maybe we want to do issue an error. But we probably don't want to issue an error there. Actually, probably what we want to do is say builder error equals true. And that way we can just actually have that as a separate thing that gets handled later. That's the way I would probably prefer to do it. So we add all those tags in there. Then at the end, what we do is we finally go to write this thing out. Then we can say, well, the first tag index is whatever the builder says it is, right? So this is builder first tag index, right? Because that's the thing that we actually set up here. We need to set that cur tag index to be equal to the first tag. So this is basically, we just start at whatever the count is. And we go from there. When we actually go to finish up, then we just say, well, one past the last tag index is just going to be whatever the current tag was, right? And then we're done. When we do this, though, we may have had an error. So we may want to, in here, have some way of issuing an error out to the stream errors. So, maybe what I'll say is here we'll just say, when we end, you can send errors down. And in this case, what we'll do is when we encounter an error of that form, we will issue it. So if in here we see that the builder had an error on it, we will do outf errors, out of tag space or something like this, right? And that should let us continue to sort of just work with that. And we can make a thing that maybe reallocates the tag array or something like this. I don't know exactly how we would want to do that, but we can probably work on making it so that error can't really happen in practice. So I think that would just work. And that would be the end of it, right? So that should associate what we wanted, I think. That should associate what we wanted in this case. Let's see what we've got here. Builder. Keep going. Builder. And yeah. And I guess I will leave the asset ID on the end because it just looked better down there and it was easier. So I guess we'll just do that. We could actually have everything down on that one, in fact, if we wanted to. In fact, maybe that's what we should do. So we just say, hey, we do an end tags. It looked like that. We pass the rest of the things, like we pass the type and the file name in there, and we just do the parsing in there, right? So begin tags doesn't do anything, like it just does that. And then in here we go through and add all the rest of the tags. So we add the basic category, and then we add all these other things in, and the tag string actually comes in here, right? So everything's in end tags, and the only thing that's in begin tags is just to get things started by passing the assets in, and that's it. That seems fine. And I guess we don't care about that either. So I think that's maybe all we needed. Might be. So we spammed a lot of stuff in there. Let's, before ending for the day, because I know we went overtime, but I just was in the middle of it. Didn't really feel like stopping. Let's just go ahead and just try real quick to step through that, right? Because I just want to see, I just want to get rid of the basic bugs. And then we'll leave the rest for next week. Which is using the system and finding out if it actually is what we want or not. All right, so if we're going to do this import, let me force it to re-import everything that we've got. So all the hands will get reread, and we'll see what they do. So in here, when we go to do parse pieces, I want to see what happens. So for starters, it's, we're passing in this file name, and that's got a, plate title screen, right? It's got the whole thing in there. So the first thing I want to do is just make sure that pop token works, right? So let's see what happens. So here's the result that it's considering right now, which is to say it's the whole thing. It's going to look for an underscore. It's going to look for 5 characters and not find it, but then it is going to find it, right? And now it's made a result which is 5 long, PLATE, right? That's correct. But now we have to make sure that it correctly removes from the source, which is this, right, the word plate and the underscore. And it did, right? So that's good. And now we can look at what we've got, and we see we have a plate. Well, it doesn't matter because we're not actually using that path. So we leave and off we go, right? So now let's take a look at the path, assuming that works, that actually involves something we do recognize, which is here. And so now what we want to do is actually build the tag array out of what's left, right? So we look at the file name that we've got here. It's just glove fingers. We want to now make sure that we build a tag set that has glove and fingers in it, right? So let's go ahead and try to do that. We start by creating a tag builder. We're going to add one of these tags in there, right? So which is what we're going to do here. 427, we're going to add one. And then we're going to write it into the tag array, which should be fine. We're then got to do our parse. Again, we added another tag there, which again, also fine. So let's see what we get when we pop the first name token. We get glove, which is what we want. Let's see if we can recognize glove, though. We do, so that's good. We then go to add that tag as a 1. So it has a glove tag of 1. That's exactly what we wanted. We now come back around, parse the next thing out. Fingers is what we wanted. Do we find it? We do. So we add that one. And now we should get, okay, so there we've got a bug. We should have gotten, for this next name token, nothing, right? But instead, we got 73, which is not a particularly compelling number to receive. You know what I'm saying to you? So our pop token is busted. And I'm not sure why that was the case. So let's try that again, shall we? It's the first time we enter end tags. So it should be pretty easy to just do that again. So here's us grabbing glove, right? And what's the tag string? Here's us, right? So let's grab, let's see what happens when we grab fingers. So here's the source, right? We go through here and we don't find anything. Oh, right. So I was a little too clever. And you can see that this +1 is wrong here, right? We have a 7. And that's all we should remove. So it's the last one that's the problem. So when we don't find, so we really do want those two cases, I guess. I can't figure out a way to be more clever there as much as I want to. So when we come in here, I guess what I would say is if the source count, well, so if the source count is valid, I think I should probably write it that way, but if the result count is valid, then the really only question is, do you use +1 or not to get rid of this, or don't you, right? And the answer, I think, is just you add the 1 if you can. So I still could be a little clever, I suppose. I don't really know if I need to be or not. I mean, here's the cleverer way. I guess. Clever is in some pretty questionable quotes there. But, you know, what are you going to do? So if we happen here and jump to end tags. I want to see what we get this time. So there's our 5. There's our, our glove. And there's our end. So that's fine. All right. So now we've imported the glove, and I think we're probably fine. When we're done importing the glove, are we stuck somewhere here? No, we're still running. There we go. So in theory now too, like if we wanted to put some properties on this glove, we could, right? It doesn't look like the facing direction's working right there, so I think we still maybe have a little bit of an issue. I mean, that looks like we're adding it correctly, but I'm not entirely sure. So we do 0 to import grid max, and we just set the ones that are in the 0 column with and the Y. We just go ahead and set those. I don't know. It doesn't look like the facing direction's really being used to pick, though, is the weird part. And I'm not sure why. So I'm trying to think if there's a reason why the tags wouldn't be obeyed in this case. It is the first tag, but that should be fine. I don't see why that would cause a problem. And let's see how we extract them here. We do first tag index, and cur tag index is the one passed, so that all seems legit. But we need to advance tag count itself. So actually, cur tag index isn't a thing. So actually, when we do this add tag here, it's really just this. Right? So as we go, we increment the tag count each time in the actual asset structure. And then when we do one pass last tag count, it's really this. Right? And so the builder itself doesn't even need that particular piece of information. That can actually go away. So they were just overwriting the tags were overwriting each other, right? So I think that's good. And off we go. So now it should import those, and we should have our different versions of our different hands there, right? Looks like we've got a scaling bug in there, but I think now we're pretty good. Like that's, I don't know if you saw that, but you can see there's like a weird like dimensional issue happening with one of those guys. So, but I think other than that, we're probably in good shape here. And I'm not 100% certain, but if we were to go in here, I'm just curious, to the entity set, and when we do our rendering and put in the facing direction tag here, I'm just curious if we were to do this, what happens, right? Just curious if we get any better matching there. Doesn't look like it. Oh. Yeah. So unfortunately, yeah, it doesn't look like that did not work first time, unfortunately. I was kind of hoping we could do a match here on one of these, but it doesn't look like it, although, to be fair, you know, I'm not 100% certain. What we want to do next is actually print out what the assets themselves actually have in terms of their what they have in terms of their tags on them, right? And I think I'll stop short of that. So I think we did all the work we need to do, but unfortunately we've got some debugging to do. I think we also did all the work we need to do for our wall pieces, because now, because that's all done, blocks don't have a grid. So really all we would do there is just this. We'd say they have a single tag at 0, 0 that gets used, right? We'd say begin the tags. We don't have anything to add, right? And then it would just use whatever the actual block's file name had in it would be what it would use. And then, you know, you're pretty much done. In fact, we could even just try this one, because this would show something on the walls. It just won't match properly because we can't add the ability to specify any properties to it, because it's gonna it doesn't look like our tag stuff got set properly or isn't getting matched properly, one or the other. But this would presumably import a block. That means that when we actually create the rooms, for example, we can at least say now that they are in fact blocks. So instead of saying asset grass here, you know, we could just say asset block instead. And then, you know, if we import blocks, they should, in theory, show up, right? Famous last words. But yeah, we've got a lot of work to do there, so I'm not actually sure. And that actually didn't take very long, so I think for some reason we didn't actually import that block. So I will look at that one as well. Parse pieces. Oops. Just want to make sure. Del local, create local, and go. So we do get here, yeah? So when we get to the block parser, let's just see what it does. I just want to have some clue. So let's go into end tags and see. Oh. Well, that's still okay. I mean, yeah, it doesn't know what these are, but that actually, we know that because we didn't add any of those tags in, but it should still produce the basic category correctly, so it should still have added it to that, right, which is the asset block. So that should actually still be fine, I think, right? So I feel like it should still have added something. Yeah. So we did import those correctly, which means that probably our renderer just at the moment doesn't actually put cubes down with a texture. Yeah, so if we just matched on the texture, I guess we're fine. It's been a long time, but so we need to actually get the we need to actually get a resolved bitmap ID to push the cube down, which is fine. Oops. So it takes a renderer texture, but we don't actually have one of those. We just have a bitmap ID. We don't really know if it's been loaded. So if you look at like push bitmap, for example, or where it is push bitmap, it does an actual check in there to determine whether or not it has to whether it can actually render it or not. It's actually this one here, right? So it first looks to see whether it can get it, and then it checks, it does the missing resource count. So we want to do that, and you can see we've got one here that does that push cube, but we haven't updated that to actually support the full set of things you can pass to renderer, which we need now. So if we actually do update it to be that way, and say, all right, here's the actual set of things we need, and the only difference is that we're going to pass one of these instead. You know what I mean? Then we can use the full deal. And I think that'd be fine. Don't quote me on that. Yeah, so we're now at least getting bitmaps on there, but it's picking something that doesn't have content to it, right? So we have to go check to make sure that there actually is something good in the bitmap. But I think that, you know, that's probably just a bug with the with that asset import that we're working on right now. Probably not with the entity renderer. So when we loop through here, presumably getting that match for the asset category actually does bring back something. Now, we don't actually know. We could check and see. It might be that when we go to do that push cube, we're actually getting a we might be getting no match back, right? But, you know, like I said, I think it's, at this point, it's too late in the day to keep going. So I think I'd stop and then just pick it up, because I think we're just in debugging land now. There's no more actual code to write. There's just debugging. So if we come here, oops, I didn't hit any of those keys that you're saying I hit. So I want to break there, but you're not letting me. Why aren't you letting me? Oh, because I'm not in debug mode. And we all know it's impossible for the compiler to tell where anything that it generated went, right? All right. So if we, what the heck? Someone want to tell me why we're not? What is happening? So you're saying it's not possible to ever have a piece type of cube? Okay, we're on the line. Oh, you know what? I know what that is. Visual Studio changed it so that if you used to have to set a breakpoint on this line. God, they just keep making this thing worse. Whatever, it's fine. So the bitmap ID here is always 0. So it looks like actually it's a match failure, right? So the problem here looks like that the asset category is failing. like we're not actually getting anything in that asset category, right? So when it says get best match from, it basically says there isn't one. So it must mean that when we categorize these things, we're doing it wrong. So we're going into here and we're saying get best match asset, but there is no asset of that type. Now, is that a save and restore issue? Or is that a match issue? So what I'm interested to know is if I was in the asset system here, when we go to actually finish these off and we do the import, right? What is going on with the breakpoints? This thing's going to be unusable pretty soon. I sure hope someone finishes assembly view in CGDB or CDB or whatever that one is on Handmade Network, because I got to switch off this thing. It's like unusable. All right, so let me see what we're actually exporting here. If we look at the, okay, so this is a glove. I want to look at an actual block. So I'll do it here. When we finish parsing the pieces, oh, well, that would be one reason, to say the least. We never told it how you would import a block, did we? All right. So now, in theory, we should actually be able to import a block. In theory. But again, we have some bug with our tag processing. So we know that we're not really quite there yet in terms of what we need to do for importing things and having them match properly. So we're just going to get whatever the first thing is. And it looks like we probably did. Right? It looks like we actually got dirt, right? So it looks like we actually did get the first one. So let's just see. I don't imagine we'll have any better luck with this than before, but let's suppose we did. Oh, and we can't really. So we didn't put any actual tags on these. So let's suppose we did this, just to see if they're lined up properly, because I can't tell with just the dirt ones. Pretty straightforward, right? So if temporarily I just said, like, I don't know, these things are just like right? They're like non-files or something. So we just said, like, look, don't process those. Leave those alone. Would we get, if we just had one, so we don't have to worry about processing tags or having the tags be bad, would they be mapped properly? Like, did they load properly? Or are they upside down? Which was something I was thinking could easily be the case. And it looks to me like they probably are. We set the colors kind of weird in here, so I probably should go fix that. Oops. So in here, we've got these like sRGB linearized things that we were doing all kinds of nonsense with. And so I think what I'll do here is just say like, look, let's pretend that everything is fine. And that it's not that at all. But I feel like we have an upside down, like we're oriented opposite the way we should be on the PNG versus textures, because they're bottom up versus top down, right? And so, and we're also blue, right? Which doesn't make a lot of sense here. I'm not sure how we're getting quite so much light in there. It's very unusual. Hold on a second. I want to turn on the full speed build. Yeah, so we got some really peculiar stuff going on, right? So we've got a lot of bugs to sort. That's okay. That's not that hard. So yeah, it looks like those are probably not quite aligned right, and the tops versus bottoms aspect of it, I think we're looking at the bottom. So I do think our bitmaps are flipped, right? In terms of how they should have been. Why we're getting such massive brightness in this case, I don't know. It's a little weird. So I'm not sure what's going on there, and I'm also not sure why things would be blue. There's a lot of things I do not understand about what I'm seeing. So there's a ton of bug stuff in there. I don't know why I'm refusing to stop the stream today. I think I was in too much of a programming mood. I have like dinner plans later as well, so probably this is bad. Just in general, let's see. Yeah. So I probably got to call it quits. So that's unfortunate, because I would like to get the rest of that working, but unfortunately not in the works at the moment. But yeah, that's very close to working, and I think mostly we just have to go through this stuff and clean it up and do the debugging necessary, because there's a lot of stuff that has to happen in there, right? That's happening in there now that needs to be done carefully. I do know we do a swap R&B in here, but it's weird that we're doing a swap R&B and we're getting the wrong color image on the way out. That's a pretty bizarre result to have. And I'm not sure where that's coming from. It could have something to do with how we're doing the downsample stuff here. One example of how this would go wrong is if we were accidentally somehow passing like the source pointer in still. It wouldn't make sense how that could really happen, but Yeah, but I really just don't know. Um, Sorry. So I'm going to call it, and I'll let anyone who's feeling particularly intrepid go ahead and debug it on their own for a while, but we'll have to pick this back up because I got to go. So I will bid you farewell for today. Let me go ahead and close down the stream here and just say thanks for joining me for the episode of Handmade Hero. And I think basically next weekend will probably just be a debugging weekend. We gotta clean that code up, do any refinement that we need to do on it, make sure there's no bugs in there for importing, downsampling, parsing the tags and all that stuff, and then get all of those art assets importing cleanly with the right tag sets, reliable, and so on. And verify that we can update them. So it's basically just going to be a weekend of debugging and code cleanup. But that's good. I mean, you want to do that. So hopefully I'll see you back here for that. And then we should be on, I guess at that point, we're going to have to be on to some entity stuff. And also we'll have to communicate back to Anna the sorts of things we want to do with the art. In terms of modifications. So we'll start on that stuff. Plenty of stuff to do, which is always good. Hope to see you back here for that. Until then, have fun programming, and I'll see you all on the internet. Take it easy, everybody.